Hello, everyone, and a hearty welcome to this Mentor Walk special session on driving your career through a downturn. Before we start, I'd like to pay my respects to our elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge that all of us today all over Australia are standing on ancient lands. It is my enormous pleasure to introduce you today to this dynamic duo from Full Potential Labs, the brains trust behind the podcast Don't Stop Us Now. Claire Hatton and Greta Thomas, both people with diverse and illustrious careers. And if you haven't yet subscribed to Don't Stop Us Now, I strongly encourage you to do so. It's on all podcast platforms, and it is there to help women accelerate their careers and bring innovation and female leadership to the fore. A quick bit of history on both Claire and Greta. Claire's background, she's English, as you'll hear soon, she was a country manager in Jakarta during riots, where she managed to get a lot of Brits and other people out of that country and ended up with a massive award for being a UK hero, I think, at the ripe old age of 26. Her career includes working for Google and part of their Australian leadership team for 7 years. She has had highs and lows, including the tragic death of her husband, Chris, in the Bali bombings. And she brings that gusto for life and embracing of all things wonderful to the help she brings to people all over the world. Greta, too, started life as a classical ballerina, or not started life, was a classical ballerina. Her stories of her own career are things that deserve their own podcast, including following Bono when he started the Red Movement to eliminate AIDS in Africa. She spent a number of years, I think 3 years, working with him, has had stints at McKinsey. She was the head of marketing for the launch of eBay in Australia and ran marketing, or played a significant role in marketing for the Sydney Opera House as well. So they both sit on boards, and their podcast is not only interviews with interesting female leaders doing enormous amounts of things, and many of the Mentor Walk's mentors are included in those podcasts, but they have a number of one-off conversations about imposter syndrome, all kinds of different things that I encourage you to do. Before we get going, Claire and Greta will be talking till about 5:40 when we'll open it to questions. Many of you have pre-submitted questions. Thank you for doing that. And please submit questions on the chat function during their talk. We'll have time for 15 to 20 minutes worth of questions at the end. Also, Mentor Walks is delighted to bring something important to you today as well, because we know COVID has having a dramatic effect on all of our lives, and will continue to have an effect on our lives after the easing continues. Mentor Walks has gone out to a mentor community to ask them if they are happy to offer one-to-one 30-minute sessions with individuals to particularly help you through these times. You'll find at the end of this session, there will be an offer to a link to sign up for one of those sessions. And we will also follow up with an email that you can do so. In addition to that, if any of you have really burning questions that you feel you need attention with now, Mentor Walks is running a virtual walk tomorrow morning in Melbourne. There are a handful of places available if you'd like to sign up overnight or as soon as this webinar is over to attend that. So without further ado, I am delighted to introduce you to the dynamic duo behind the Don't Stop Us Now podcast and Full Potential Labs. Over to you.
Oh, thank you, Bobby. I feel like we need theme music.
Yeah.
Da, da, da. And hello, everybody. And thank you so much for making the time to join us here with the wonderful Mentor Walks today. You know, this session was called Driving Your Career in a Downturn for a reason. And what I'm just going to spend a minute or two doing is kind of setting the scene and the context. And if you think about it, you know, we're all driving along on the road on our career journeys and paths. And then suddenly, some months back, COVID-19 happened and we were all shuffled off the road. The roads are deserted. And now we're slowly making our way back to the road. But if you think of the road and the journey as a bit like an analogy for our economy, when we get back in our cars and start driving along on our own personal journeys, it's likely to be a whole lot more slow, sort of congested, and frankly, sometimes very frustrating. And the thing is, we are all in this to differing sort of realms of experience, but we're all in this together. We're all on the road in some fashion right now, heading back right now. Now, for some of us who are on the road when we're driving along, we're going to get an unexpected detour in the form of perhaps being laid off or having your hours dramatically cut. And it's no fun, is it, when you're trying to get to somewhere in a hurry and then the traffic police are saying, detour, detour, you've got to go around. And I think it's a really interesting way of thinking about that's what could happen to some of us. And that, yes, it might be frustrating. Yes, it might be what you're not expecting. But to remember that sometimes when you go on these unexpected journeys, you can find truly amazing things that you would not have considered before. It's happened to me, and it's probably happened to you too, Claire, hasn't it? Where in a career sense, something happens at the job you're at, you might get a new boss, you don't like that, and then you want to change, but actually, and although that really frustrated you at the time, when you made the change, you found something better. And so to bear that in mind, yes, we're all probably going to have detours of some sort in this bumpy road ahead. And the final part of this analogy before, I stop on the whole driving your career thing for the moment anyway, is when we go back to the road, some lanes are going to be faster than the others. And if you think about it, for example, if you're in travel or tourism right now, that lane is going seriously slow right now. It's going to be very, very challenging if you're trying to progress your career or change jobs within that sector. But if you look across the road, imagine you're in a multi-lane freeway in Los Angeles, all the lanes are going different speeds because every sector is going to be having different experiences. And we know some sectors are doing really well. Clearly, obviously, things like supermarkets and household goods, but also, e-commerce businesses, a number of them are growing. Online learning kind of businesses. Claire's on the board of one of those companies. They've been hiring. And so it's about thinking about, okay, I'm on the road. Maybe I don't want to change the job in terms of functional skills like marketing or law or sales or whatever skills you have, but maybe you might want to look at other lanes. So I think that's enough of the driving analogy, but just to remember, we are all on this road together and it's going to affect us all in some way. So don't worry, we will get to where we're going. We might have some detours. You might change your end destination, but hang in there.
Okay, well, so we know that so many of you sent in questions. So instead of us sort of just talking about what we may have talked about before, what we decided to do was actually shape this session around the themes that came out from your questions. So the way that we're going to do this is we've got until 5:40 and we're going to touch on 5 themes. The first is going to be around thinking of changing your career and some advice around that. The second will be around mindset and motivation and how you really start to have some practical things to help you. The third one will be, if you are actually facing a job loss, perhaps you've been made redundant already, or you feel like it's coming. And the fourth one will be around mentoring. How do you mentor in this weird COVID environment and post-COVID? And finally, we'll touch a little bit on mentoring and how do you get a mentor?
And networking.
Did I?
Yep. I think you said mentoring twice by mistake.
Oh, did I say mentoring twice? Sorry about that. Networking first and then mentoring. Yep. So I think without further ado, let's move to talking about if you're thinking about changing your career.
Well, here's what's so interesting, you guys. This was the most popular question that you all submitted before today began. Questions around the notion of, is now a good time to think about changing careers? Is now, the time to make a leap? So we were really fascinated by that. And so actually, with Joni's help, what we'd love to do is actually ask you all a quick poll, which will pop up on your screens in a minute. And the first question that we would love to ask you is, who is either thinking of or wanting to change careers in the next 6 months? And I'm just looking, and there you go. Just click a yes or a no there.
Okay.
Right, and now I wonder if we're going to see okay, we can't see the results yet, but I guess we're waiting. Okay, Joni, let us know if you've got any results there. Let's look at chat. Here we go. Okay. Yes, look at that.
Wow.
73, okay, 59% of you. So more than half of you are thinking now or the next 6 months is certainly time to at least be thinking about changing your career. It's really fascinating, isn't it? Okay,
yeah.
So the next question we want to ask you is why? Why now? So there's going to be another quick poll coming up onto your screen, and hopefully you will see that. Okay, and we've got 4 different reasons for you to choose from. Do you want to change because you're really looking to get a higher salary, or you don't like your boss, you want to progress faster, or maybe there's another reason? We'll just give you a moment to all have an answer of that. Okay, that's a much more even split. So 49% is for another reason, and that's the highest answer.
56% actually.
Sorry, yeah, 56%. And then the next answer is to progress your career faster, and then to earn more money, and then don't like my boss. Well, that's good news on the boss front, people of Australia. Excellent, pleased to hear that.
Yeah, because that's the #1 reason for wanting to change careers. So, wow.
So,
okay.
Yeah, I wonder what the other is. Feel free to put a few things in chat, but what do you think, Claire?
The others?
The other reason, because
more purpose and impact. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Do something where you can be your own boss, make your own changes.
Yeah.
Okay. And looking at postgraduate. Okay. So looking for very different changes. Well, I think, the thing to think about here is, is to really, we all have to take ownership of our own career. And it's great to see that so many of you are thinking proactively in terms of you might want to change career or jobs, because obviously it might not be a complete career change in the next 6 months. If we were advising generically, not knowing anything about you and the circumstances, and if you already had a job, I think both Claire and I would be saying, we don't think the next 6 months is the best time to leave a job and try and get another job because of what's going to be happening economically. And what we both know from experience and coaching many people and the like is it's far easier to get a job, and I'm sure you know this as well, when you already are in a job. Having said that, it may well be, and what we saw from a number of your questions before today and some of those quick chat answers that we just had a chance to look at then, that you have some genuine reasons that want to make you change job, whether it's for more purpose, whether it's because you actually want to start your own business and things like that. And I think what we couldn't emphasize strongly enough is that you make sure you take the time, really take time out to think very carefully about what really is important to you. What are your values? How will that lead you to sort of make choices? What are the pragmatic needs? What are your financial needs in the next 6 to 12 months? And for some of us, we still have to pay the rent, right? And so taking a leap now to go study, but not being clear what job we will get afterwards or what the job market will be like when you're ready, then these are things that you definitely need to take into account. Once you've had a really good deep think about this, and really encourage you to talk to other people like friends, or if you have a mentor, or if you have a coach, to bounce around the ideas of what you're thinking and to make sure then that you build a plan to that. But remember, what's that saying? God gets us to make plans so he can just laugh at us, as in you can't plan things so tightly, but having an idea. But what we would say about your plans and your timeframes now that we've had COVID-19 is, remember the detour on the journey. You might have to be more patient because, the CEOs that we're working with having to completely rethink their businesses. Many businesses are cutting costs and having to shrink staff. And so, it's going to be a patience game potentially once you've got your plan.
And I think there's just one, I think, bear in mind that if JobKeeper finishes in September, there is likely to be a fairly large impact from that. So, if you're absolutely convinced that you want to jump ship and you've done all the thinking, then go for it. But just be aware that we're not through this. This is the impact of what's happening has not really hit us yet in terms of the job market.
Now, I know some people might be feeling that they're not happy in their current job, but they're actually having real trouble defining what it is they wanted to do. And I was given great advice when I was doing my MBA, well, don't worry if you can't define the end journey, if you can't build a beautiful map and plan for where you want to drive your career to, think about the attributes. And I dug out today, this is from 2006, and I have down the column here, the key attributes. You won't be able to read it because of the light and all the flaring and everything. Key kind of characteristics that I knew that I wanted my next job to have. And I'll just read a few. I won't read all of them because we probably don't have time. But, I knew, for example, that I wanted it to be an international company or role. I knew that I wanted to report to a very senior person, if not the CEO, because I was already, had been, chief marketing officer and things like that. So I was used to reporting to the CEO. I also had the pragmatic, I need to earn at least X dollars per week or per month in order to pay the mortgage. And I also knew that I wanted it to sort of have a role that had enough diverse responsibilities where I wouldn't be pigeonholed as just one very sort of tight, contained thing. So that's just an idea of the criteria. The clearer you can get about that, the easier it will be for you to plan your to think about that career change. The other aspect is, I know career progression is really important to all of us, but in a time like this especially, thinking about, as Mia Friedman, from Mamma Mia and the like would describe it, thinking about your career as a lattice, not a vertical ladder, that there's a great time to be open-minded about the detours that may come your way, or the way your existing job might change thanks to COVID-19, to take that advantage of learning new skills and building out the breadth, not just kind of aiming in a tunnel vision sense for where you're headed. Yeah, and I think, if you are looking to change jobs, expect it to take longer than it would have pre-COVID. So pre-COVID, the kind of rule of thumb seems to be about between 3 and 6 months to find the job that's right for you. So it's likely to take longer. I think that's probably time to keep moving to the next theme.
Yes,
you
indeed.
all send in so many questions.
And we'll come back to some of the questions that you're putting forward in the chat. We'll come back to a bit later on with Bobby. Yeah. So the next area that you sent lots of questions in was the way we're going to bucket it is about mindset. So whether that's about, how do you stay motivated when things are really uncertain, or you're not enjoying your job because things have changed, or you're isolated. What can you actually do to make things better for yourself? So mindset really is one of the most important factors in all of this, because you need to, in this area of uncertainty, which everybody is facing, there's not one of us that doesn't feel uncertain, because nobody knows what's going to happen. It's really normal to feel threatened, to feel a bit unsafe, because that's just the way our brain's wired. We're wired for safety, to keep us safe. And having a sense of certainty makes us feel safe. But there are some things that we can do to actually help our brain feel safe, and to also help us approach this in a really resilient way, in a way that really helps us see the positive. And the first thing I want to talk about is your inner narrative. Now, we've got a whole podcast episode on this called How to Manage Your Evil. how to manage your inner critic, who we call your evil DJ. He's got soundtracks. But in this scenario now, you might be finding that your evil DJ is saying things to you like, I'm going to get fired, or, there's just no doubt there's not going to be any job opportunities, or it might be I'm useless,
or so competitive,
they'll never pick me, and that's not actually very helpful. So remember that your thoughts are the architects of your dreams. And so what narrative do you want to have? Start to think about the right narrative for you. So the narrative might be, it's really competitive out there, but I'm going to do my best. Or I'm going to search for opportunities to learn. Or
I've got it's competitive out there, and I've got a completely unique set of skills and experiences that no one else has, and it might be exactly what this role's looking for and needs.
Yeah, absolutely. So, really notice your narrative, think about what what narrative you want to have, and also get some outside advice from people, particularly if you're worried and you're sort of having all these thoughts. Actually speak to people, find out if it's actually fact or your evil DJ just spinning those soundtracks. The second thing, which often comes up as part of your evil DJ, is just try not to compare yourself to others. As they say, comparison is the thief of all joy. It really is. And so think about the fact that, back to Greta's analogy, you're driving along and you're in your own car. Drive your own car. Be in your own laneway. It doesn't matter what anybody else is doing. It's about you and yourself. I think somebody that we spoke to the other day said, compare yourself with before, don't compare yourself with others. So that's the way to think about that. The third thing is about focusing on what you can control. There is no point focusing on things that are completely out of your control. Things completely out of your control may be whether your company does make, redundancies. Things outside of your control are, when you go back to work, those kinds of things. And for me, I have a quote that goes everywhere with me. It's on my computer, it's on the fridge, and it's the Serenity Prayer. And it goes like this: grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And I look at that many, many, many times a day, and it really helps me actually focus on the things that really matter, and and stop worrying about those things that I can't control. Right. Next, I've got
maybe
a couple more. Okay. So a few of you mentioned, how do you, if you're not enjoying your job, how do you actually keep yourself motivated? How do you find meaning? It may be that you do decide that you're going to jump ship and try and change your job or change career. But if you can't do that because of whatever reason, it's really important to actually think about meaning, because having meaning really is very good for your well-being and gives you a sense of control. And I really love this story about when somebody asked 3 different men who were crushing stones about how they would describe their job. And the first man said, well, I'm breaking big rocks into little rocks. The second man said, I'm feeding my family. And the third man said, I'm building a cathedral. They're all doing the same job, but they're finding different meaning. And so if you can reframe the lack of meaning that perhaps you're finding right now, and actually look for the meaning in what you're doing, I think you'll find that gives you a much greater sense of control and happiness, in fact.
I had a really pragmatic meaning for one job where I wasn't happy, and I just wanted to leave. But then I stepped back and realized it would be leaving too soon in terms of what my CV would look like if I did that. And goodness knows I've had enough job and career changes over the years. And so I told myself, well, I have a choice and I choose to stay here for my CV. And that was a very kind of pragmatic meaning, but it flipped it because it made me in control.
Yeah, it's really amazing how just reframing something can really make the difference.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think I've done enough on mindset, so over to you.
Now, a number of you have been saying and did say before today, it's really competitive out there. How am I going to get an edge? How will I get a role in this kind of environment? And as Claire said, it's really important to remember, don't worry about the others. Yes, it is competitive, but it always is competitive. You've got to run your own race. And, if we take a step back, if you do lose your job, please do not take it personally. No one will judge you for that, even though it's going to hurt when it happens, or if it's already happened. We totally empathize, been there. But just don't take it personally, and don't let it affect the value you believe that you can bring to other roles in future. Now, you really need to take control if you're looking for a new job and having a job search go on. Don't just rely on job ads. Get proactive. If you've done the thinking beforehand about what's important to you and the kind of role and the kind of organization you're thinking you'd love to join, then find a way to reach out to people that might know people who work at that organization, or certainly be following them on LinkedIn. We've actually got a whole podcast episode that ran a couple of weeks ago called How to Game Plan If You Lose a Job, and it's well worth listening to that in terms of some of the prep to think about that you could be doing. But the other thing that's really important, and one of a very senior headhunter in Australia mentioned this to us only a week or so ago, was, don't just apply for the one job. You want lots of balls in the air, and ideally you want to be in a job when you're doing this. Don't wait, and you've really got to spread, particularly in this kind of economic environment, around, and think creatively. When I was a long time ago, I was the ballet dancer, and then I went into journalism and I wanted to be a TV reporter. I didn't have a degree. I had studied journalism by correspondence. Whoopee! So I thought, well, the only way I can get from radio to TV, because I tried the traditional applied with the job ad, is I wrote to a TV executive producer who'd worked for 60 Minutes, and then he was running the newsroom in Perth, where I lived at the time, and offered to hire him to train me. And he didn't take money. He took me out for one day with a camera crew, and then I got a TV job with the tape that they produced.
Didn't you pay him a crate of beer?
Yeah, he said, give me a crate of beer for the cameraman and the sound man. But then there's also, ways of approaching companies with ideas, showing you're enthusiastic. You're going to have to be creative here. And, I think when it comes to the interview itself, if you get shortlisted for an interview, then practice with a friend. Again, listen to the episode, but also keep an eye out. We've actually got an online course coming up in a couple of months' time that will be all about how you can ace a job interview and stand out from the crowd. So look out for that. And as I said, you work your network, and I think that's the perfect segue for handing back to you, Claire.
Thank you so much. Okay, so network. So how do you network, particularly in COVID when everyone's working from home? There's no doubt it's more difficult. No doubt, because people aren't having coffees, and actually many people are also feeling very stressed, right? So it's more difficult. But I think it's not impossible. Well, I know it's not impossible. And actually, I've been helping lots of people who have come from actually all sorts of parts of my dark past. And I'm sort of helping people because I know what the situation is. So I'm going to give you a few tips on how to think about networking right now. So the first thing is that I would start, get really strategic about networking. Don't just firebomb and just try and contact whoever you can. Get strategic. What's your goal? What's the problem that you're trying to solve? And who might be able to help you solve that? So that's the first thing. Then think about your contacts, and particularly LinkedIn is, really your power tool right now. LinkedIn is I mean, the number one tool to be using. So think about your contacts and put them into different buckets. You've got your A's, who are people that you'd feel really comfortable contacting. You've got your B's, who, you've got a professional relationship with them. That they know you, you know them. And then you've got your C's, who are, probably acquaintances. Maybe you don't maybe you've never even met them, right? And they're on LinkedIn. So obviously your A's are going to be your ace card, because they're the ones that know you. So think about them first and reach out to them. And then think strategically about your B's. And that's where I would really start. Now, when you're reaching out to them, make sure that you don't go straight in with an ask. I think at the moment, it's all about being human. It's about building relationships. That's what networking is. It's about building relationships. So, I would be going and checking in with people, just, asking them, I'm reaching out to make sure, to see if you're happy and safe, and I'm sending you my best wishes, for example, to start a conversation. Now, you might not hear back from people. Be patient. It's not about you. It's the situation. People might be, facing all sorts of things themselves. So
what about if it's someone more senior than you, so that you don't feel comfortable saying, hope you're happy and safe, because they might be more senior and you don't know them as well? What do you think?
Well, I don't see why you wouldn't say that, though, to somebody more senior.
Yeah.
I mean, if you know them. Yeah.
Okay, if you know them.
Yeah. The other thing to think about is, like in building normal relationships, what can you do for that person? Because it's about reciprocity, which I always have a struggle with that word.
Almost said it perfectly.
It's really, what can you give? What can you, maybe somebody has shared a post, share it, comment on it, send them a private message to say, that was really great, it really touched me, or, whatever it is. Build ways to start conversations. Send them best wishes for their birthday, whatever it is, just get human. And if you do get to speak, see if you can do it on VC, not on the phone, because again, it's that coffee meetup, it's building that relationship. If you can see people, it's much easier to build the relationship. Okay, so I'm going to move on now to mentoring, because I know that.
Well, it's a beautiful segue, isn't it? Because there's some of the questions you would ask the people that you would be networking with are kind of almost questions you could potentially be asking a mentor too. So I think this is
yeah, totally. We had one question that asked us, how do I get a permanent mentor? Now, our answer to that question is you don't. That is not the goal that you should be focusing on, getting a permanent mentor. It's very scary for a mentor to think they're permanent. That's not what mentoring is about. Our advice to you is to, again, think about who you need, who in your life you need to help you get where you need to go. And think about building what we call a virtual personal advisory board. So that's people who you can go to for advice, to ask questions. It might be a family friend here. You might have an old colleague here. You might have an old boss here, or a current boss. You might have somebody who's mentored you in the past. And think about that virtual personal advisory board. And think about, going to people and asking them for advice. Yeah. So don't, and have, one piece of advice, not, I need to change my job. Can you help me?
Yeah, get specific.
Get specific. Get really specific. Because people, if it's an easy ask, then and it's for advice, then people generally will help you. So start that way, build up your virtual personal advisory board. You don't need to tell the people that they're on your virtual personal advisory board. You might speak to them once, you might speak to them 10 times. And use organizations like Mentor Walks. You know, this is a brilliant, brilliant opportunity to ask that specific question. And they, you know, you'll find that mentors will introduce you to other people. You'll get introductions, which is always good. So use things like this to really build on that.
Yeah, I think that's really great. And I think the other thing though is, don't expect someone you don't know at all to make an introduction and be fulsome about what a great candidate you are. You know, you have to earn trust and build, as Claire said earlier, you build a relationship. And you know what you might find for those people who would love an ongoing or permanent mentor is, you know, if you start with asking people very specific bits of advice, and then you show that you want to build a constructive reciprocal relationship with them, and you know, you send them articles that they might be interested in, you boost their posts, etc., then you might find you get, you know, second, third, fourth opportunities, and before you know it, you might have an ongoing mentor. So it's all about thinking about that.
And if you really want somebody to be permanently, or somebody that you really need advice from, then really think about paying for it. So get a coach. Coaches are really fantastic to help you work through any of these transitions. So find a coach.
Right. Well, good advice. And we're looking forward very soon now to answer questions from you. So you feel free to start writing more on chat. But just to kind of summarize, remember, we are all in this weird, messy, uncertain time together. Naturally, we're all on different journeys. Just drive your car, be really clear about where you want to go, and be open-minded to the detours and the opportunities that may come your way that you weren't planning on or weren't expecting, because you just never know what you might find. So at least be open-minded when you think about them. And of course, don't forget, sign up for Don't Stop Us Now. Go to don'tstopusnow.co and please sign up to our email so you don't miss out any new episodes or any of the advice and tips we share every other week when we send out our emails. That's all right. And so I think we have finished almost exactly when we were going to, and I think Bobby is about to come back and ask us some questions.
I think so too. There she is.
Thank you so much. That was truly marvellous. I'm interested in the question about the skills that women should be looking at to adapt to the future of work. There is a fantastic thing doing the rounds on LinkedIn that says, who's responsible for the digital transformation of your organisation? The Chief Executive Officer, the Chief Technology Officer, or COVID-19. I think that one of the things that's coming out of COVID is that the acceleration of the digital transformation of every organisation. And I often see women who have not thought about the skills related to that they need to consider. I'm interested in your views on what are the skills, both hard and soft, that we need to be thinking about for the future of work.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Who wants to go?
I don't mind.
Want me to go?
Yeah, okay, you go first. And
okay,
I can chip in.
Yeah, okay. So, I think it does depend on what sector you're in, what role you're in, and what your background's been. But I would say that every single person, doesn't matter who you are, really needs to have an understanding of digital. You need to understand the new technologies, not the detail of the new technologies, but the implications, what they are. What is AI? What is big data? All of those areas that are up and coming and really are changing the world. What's quantum computing? What's it going to do? So, read, first thing. There are actually lots of courses out there. People like MIT are really good. There's lots of really interesting stuff on MIT.
Yeah, actually, and General Assembly is doing Free Friday.
That's right.
So every Friday they've got free courses. It's only in the month of June, where you can learn sort of specific skills like coding or UX. All those kind of skills, and as Claire said, it depends where you want to go and where you're at, but you make a choice. But being familiar with the tech.
Really important. So there's that digital piece, then there's the hard skills, you know, depending on your job. You know, if you're in marketing, well, you really do need to be across digital marketing, because that's just, I mean, that's what everybody does nowadays, and I would imagine that you probably are all across that anyway. But educate yourself, keep educating yourself. You know, it's changing so fast. So I don't think that just because you did a course 2 years ago that, you know everything. You probably don't. Also, try and, you know, do as many projects as you can, put your name forward, because experience of these things, I think, is the key. And then there's soft skills. You know, there's empathy, emotional intelligence, creativity,
problem solving.
That's and problem solving. That they are actually, you know, women generally have a heightened tendency towards these skills. So we're actually in a better position. So, but it, you know, really focused on those areas as well in terms of your role.
Terrific. One of our participants is doing the MIT courses and says they're wonderful. So
fantastic. Yeah,
great.
And some of my team are also doing the General Assembly Free Fridays.
Oh,
they're terrific. So
and then there's people like Singularity University, if you want to go look at the real big, you know, exponential future. They're really interesting too.
And the message really is constant learning, isn't it? Constantly learning and upskilling. A question here, when you're working remotely, how can you best position yourself as a key contributor for those in leadership with whom you don't have direct interaction?
Yeah, okay. So by default, it's really my turn to answer, but you're going to have to jump in as well, I think, because I think you've got some ideas on this. But first thoughts are, why don't you have direct contact with certain leaders in the business? Is it because your manager is overly protective of those relationships and never gives you, if you like, that oxygen? It may be that you want to talk to your direct manager about, you know, I really want to work on, this is a hypothetical example, I really want to work on my presentation skills, and I think it'd be just great for me to have the experience of presenting to some more, you know, to that senior meeting that you're going to and sharing the work that I've done. Could I present my part? You know, that's just an example. So I think looking for opportunities, and, you know, our managers are not mind readers. Your manager might not even have an idea that you've got a bit of a hunger to have some exposure. So that would be one thought. Claire, some other thoughts?
So I think get yourself into the shoes of the leader that you want to get some exposure with, and think about what would be helpful to them. So it may be something like, you know, you've just done a project and there's some learnings that have come out of this project that actually would be really helpful for other parts of the business. Well, email him or her and tell them about it. You know, ask if within your company, if a skip level is an appropriate thing to do. I know in many tech companies that we work with, skip level is normal.
What is skip level?
Skip level is basically you skip your manager and you go above them, or they or the opposite way around. They go down. So it's just a way to actually have direct contact with somebody more senior and also somebody more junior. So yeah, so you know, I would just sort of reach out. What's the worst thing that could happen?
Terrific. It leads into another question, which is, what are the practical steps that you can follow to start a conversation with your boss about new opportunities and promotion at this time?
Well, I was about to start.
Go for it.
You know, I think it's going to, obviously timing is everything in both the macro sense, like this time of COVID, but then also in the day of the week, and how does your boss look that day? Stressed, exhausted. He's just had a win and he's on top of the moon. So think about the actual timing and the scenario of your business. A great time to have this kind of conversation is if you have a performance review coming up, and to weave it in there, because that is the natural time to be expecting to talk about your career wishes, desires, and expectations. Now, if there isn't any review and performance review scheduled in the next few months, but you really feel like you need to communicate this to your manager, then finding the right time in the right way. And if you're not sure how, then maybe ask a trusted peer who also can advise you and knows the specific manager about saying, what you want to do is be able to say, I'd love to set up time to have a conversation with you about my career. I know it's a complex, messy time, but it would still be really great and helpful if we could have that conversation anyway. So that would be an example.
One other thing might be, again, think about it from their perspective and have a look at, how you can be proactive to identify opportunities. Because like having been a manager of lots of people, I used to have people come to me and say, what about my career? As if it was all up to me. Mm-hmm. But actually, you need to drive it. Yeah. So think about the kinds of things that you want to be working on. Even explore opportunities within the company. Maybe there's something going on over here that you think that you could add value to as well as learn. So just get a bit more proactive.
Yeah, I mean, I take what you've said about having empathy for the situation that your boss and the organisation is in, and coming to that conversation with that context, rather than it just being about you as an individual. I think that's a very effective path. There are so many people out there. How do you stand out from the crowd when you're looking for a job?
What would you like to
do? You want to do it?
I don't mind.
Go on.
Okay, just quickly. I think it's harder these days if something is advertised and you've got that very formal channel of, click here to submit. However, there are some things that you can do. There is nothing more compelling. And again, we heard this from this top headhunter only about a week ago. There's nothing more compelling than the hiring manager hearing from a colleague who you've managed to get to that, I hear you're meeting Sarah next week. She's fantastic, right? So it's things like that. How can you make the network and LinkedIn work for you? That's one thing. Now, another thing might be either in the application if it's appropriate, but you do need to read the instructions for how to apply, because often they're very rigid about what you should send them. But there or in the interview, show, if you get that interview, then show that you've gone the extra mile in your research and ideas, and that you've mystery shopped if it's possible. You've really got to show that you have done masses of homework, and you have to have a great answer in your application, ideally, as well as in person, for why you're excited about this role.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also your three key messages. So all of that research and thinking about the role and your experience, then come back and reshape that in terms of the three key things that you want them to know about you. So getting really tight on your narrative. And actually, the interview course that Greta mentioned, we spend lots of time on that. And we're bringing in experts from around the globe who are either recruiters within big companies or executive search people. So,
yeah. And then the only other thing I'd add to this is, don't be confined, as I said earlier, just by the job ads. If you're really passionate about a company, if you know that sector is not doing too badly or is doing quite well despite COVID, then learn about them and get proactive. And this is where, depending on the industry, you can be as creative as all get out. Like you say, if you wanted to join advertising right now, then, you have an invitation to be creative in how you just proactively contact the managing director with why you are an indispensable member of his team that he doesn't even know about yet. So, there's that side of it. Be proactive. Don't just wait for the ads.
Yep, totally.
Okay, I can see the energy. What about if you're in the situation where you can hold out for your job, your dream job, or you can sidestep and accept something that's not your dream job? Given where we are at this time, what is your advice for, I think it's Harriet who submitted this question, hold out for the dream job or accept something less?
and you were doing a PhD before having a baby, so now
That's
attempting
right.
to re-enter the workforce. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
So, yeah. Look, I think it depends on your situation and, you know, your financial situation, and your overall skill set and what industry you're in. Again, you know, has your industry been hit really badly? But I think, you know, let's say this would be my generic advice. My generic advice would be, it's probably just as good to take an opportunity right now if you can learn from it. And particularly take the opportunity if there is a person that you're working with who you can really learn from. So, you know, if the manager is great, take it in a nanosecond, because that will be really important for you and that will help you dream job quicker. Whereas you could sit and wait where you are. I don't know how comfortable that feels. And it could be sort of mediocre and frustrating. Your dream job might come in 6 months if you're really lucky, or it might take 2 years.
And depending on how specific you are about that dream job, you might actually be able to do some behind the scenes research about the likelihood of timing and when it would come up, either in one or multiple companies, depending on how specific you are. And so, yeah, but it does, as Claire said, come down to all the values of, you know, how are you financially and the like. So yeah, I agree with Claire.
Yeah, and I you know, in the past, I really have learned that having a strategy, you know, and making sure that you have learning blocks that give you the experience and the exposure to certain things, even if it's a sidestep, are just really important. You know, it's not always about getting there. It's about the journey rather than the destination.
I think that's a great segue into the question that's just come in from Riley. She says, I'm a year or two away from the job hunt. Do now. And she's loving the session, by the way.
Excellent. And so, is Riley studying right now? Could you let us know, Riley, in the comments?
No, we don't know. Let's assume she's not studying.
Okay.
Well,
okay. So, right. So she's actually in a job.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, you know, I think thinking about studying, very happy, fantastic. So brilliant. You're in an awesome position, Riley. Of course, you know, we've got uncertainty ahead of us, so none of us can actually say with confidence we're in an awesome position right now. I had a contract ended just last week, so, you know, it comes back to thinking about, well, how clear are you about what you would like to do next, you know? And if you think about that roadmap for your career, what are the likely next stepping stones? Starting to ask people, if you've got some clarity about that, then asking people who have that role, you know, how did you get that role? What are the skills that were really valued and made the difference for you, snagging the job versus somebody else? You know, over time, you've got time to do that. The other thing is you can think about what experience can you put your hand up for and proactively shape your current role to make it an even nicer sort of overlap with your next role. And just a kind of a general statement to everybody here, when people advertise a job and the data shows it time and time again, and every headhunter will say this too, don't wait to think you've got to have every criteria before you apply. 60%, 50% apply. It's a wish list on those job ads. Those points are wish lists. So just start working in the next sort of year or two towards that.
Is it worth me sharing my story about how I left Google?
I'm not sure because of the time.
I think you should take. I think that would be a great way to end. And then I'll say some closing words. I think that would be wonderful.
Okay, all right. So I was at Google in a great job, leadership there for, at this point, 5 years. And I loved Google, but I knew I wanted to do something sort of that had more impact than selling ads. Okay, so I actually worked with a coach for 2 years. And it really went from not wanting to go to actually working out, you know, what my purpose was, what my values were, You know, what would my ideal life look like? And I started to build this picture of the fact that I actually wanted to go and start my own company. So what I did, you know, so that took me probably about 9 months to really get super clear. And then I spent the next 15 months being super strategic at Google. So I developed a program that I rolled out to everybody at Google in Sydney as a pilot. And by the time I left, we had in. When I actually did leave to start our company, Full Potential Labs, they'd got the results in from this program that I'd run, and it was so good that they called me back in 2 months later and said, look, we'd like you to come in as a vendor, and we'd like you to roll this program out at Google, which wasn't what I was expecting. Right? I was just doing it because I thought that would give me some really great experience and a group. But it then led basically to us being a global contract with Google, where we worked with Google over 4 years and had partners all around the world delivering it. So get strategic, think about it over a period of time, work with a coach if you need to, and think about, you know, what you want to do and leverage where you are.
Okay. So look, on that note, with 1 minute to spare, thank you so much. I know that there are a number of questions that we have been asked here that we haven't had a chance to get to, including how do I find a coach? Yeah. Encourage you will be receiving an email, and on screen there will be a link to the opportunity for one-on-one sessions with our mentors throughout Australia, and encourage you to take up this study. We're about good women helping good women. These are all senior women who recognise that all of us need help. So please take up that opportunity. And as I mentioned, in Melbourne tomorrow morning at 7:15, Melbourne Mentalks is running. It doesn't matter if you're not in Melbourne because it's virtual. So if you do have a burning question and would like to attend that tomorrow morning, please go to mentalwalks.com.au and you can sign up right now to the Melbourne Walk. I really want to thank Claire and Greta for sharing their immense wisdom and their stories, and helping us all navigate what are really, really tricky times and beyond. So with enormous appreciation from Adina Jacobs and I, the co-founders of Mental Walks, thank you so much. And I encourage everyone to sign up for the Don't Stop Us Now podcast. Good night, everyone. And thank you so much for attending today.
Thanks, Bobby. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.